All right, folks, thanks for being with us today. We have Barry Snell, who is running for Santa Monica City Council. Thank you very much for being here. Why don't you take a minute to tell folks who you are and why you're running?
Well, thanks, Matt, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Barry Snell, as you said, and I've been a resident for this town for over 20 years. And during that period of time, I've been very involved in many of the issues with respect to our educational system and our downtown Santa Monica. I'm a trustee presently for Santa Monica College. Been a trustee there for 10 years. I'm a state board trustee for the last six, and I spent 4 years on the school board. This past June, I left the downtown Santa Monica board, termed out after 12 years on that. And in my day job, I'm a CPA. I've raised, my wife and I have five children between us. We raised four of them in the Santa Monica school system. And I care deeply about public service. And that's why over the past 16 years, I've ran for office and been part of various bond initiatives, um, school board issues, downtown issues, transportation issues, and I've been a part of hiring for our for our school board and our college board, and also for our downtown Santa Monica board. I've been part of the hiring of those individuals, so I'm very deeply vested in Santa Monica.
Sure. So that tells us a little bit about your past public service. Great. Then you say
Right,
decades of it.
right,
Why move
right
over
now.
to the city council race? What is it that's driving you for city council? Because outside of UTSM, your long history has been largely focused on education,
True.
right? So why make the switch? What's driving you to move into the council race?
I'm glad you've asked that question. I've thought about being on council for or running for council many times before, but I just believe at this particular time um, that my expertise in budgeting and public finance budgeting, my understanding of housing issues, um, and my issues with respect to our unhoused population requires someone with my leadership skills, someone with my experience in handling those kind of issues. You know, with the college, we have an open policy, so we bring in anyone that wants to go to school there. And during the 9 years that 10 years I've been on the board, I advocated heavily because we had a real issue where one out of every five community college students was homeless, and I really
Not
was
at
determined
SMC specifically. That was like statewide, right?
statewide, but
Yeah.
SMC was actually in those numbers also.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so I really advocated strongly for housing, and I'm successful. I was successful along with my other trustees. We're going to build some housing on our campus, which is I'm very proud of doing that.
Hmm. So you mean budgetary skills. So you mentioned budget and but housing, homelessness. You referenced your skills as applying in those three areas. So give me an example. Give me an example of where your skills. You can pick one of the three. We'll get to all of them, but
Okay, yeah.
like give me some examples of where your
I,
skills are
I
applicable in those
I'll
zones.
give you a perfect example. We one of the issues with downtown was public safety.
Hmm.
Over the last couple of years, it was after the mini riot that we had 4 years ago. The downtown uh, constituents, property owners, businesses, and community was quite concerned about safety.
Hmm.
Um, and so, as as one of the individuals on the board at the time, I was treasurer and then became chairman of the board. We really had to take a look at one, advocating for more safety. So we had many meetings with our um, police police officers, and then we found money in our own budget to temporarily put a project together where we could provide some kind of safety in our downtown. I was integrally involved in that, and to my to the success of downtown, we were able to find $1.7 million to try to do a pilot program for the financing of this particular initiative. And so those are, but it took an awful lot of discussion. Initially, some board members wanted to have safety where we wanted to actually have security guards that was armed. I was totally against that. And so I really advocated for a type of safety that would benefit our downtown. But I always thought that it should be a temporary situation where, at the end of the day, our city government should take over that responsibility. So these are kind of some initiatives that I've talked about that I was involved in that really gave me insight as to some of our city policies and policies that would really be beneficial if I was on council to be able to work on those things. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the
So
reason why.
DTSM hired private security guards,
Yeah,
right? That's what we're talking about
yeah.
here. And so I guess what how does that translate? How does that project, that experience, that knowledge translate into something that's going to improve the public safety, or at least the perception of public safety for residents of the city, right?
Well,
Like what are you going to do to are you advocating for more private security guards? Are you saying that maybe it's a function of looking at contracts? Like how are you going to take that experience in DTSM and
I,
leverage it to do something for the city at large?
I'll tell you. I mean, one of the things that provided was while we were going through this exercise, it really gave us insight as to uh, our current police department, the deployment of our current police department, how they were deployed,
Mm-hmm.
and 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 the cost that was involved with it. And what I mean by that, we talked an awful lot about on downtown Santa Monica. We met with the police quite frequently over the last 2 years, even more so. We talked about how the police could be deployed downtown to be more efficient in in handling um, safety issues that were affected in our downtown. So, and in addition to that, what type of crimes were being committed, where our police officers were needed, versus the type of situations where officers really didn't need to be there, but we needed to have some kind of other type of services provided for this unhoused individual. We know that 60% of the crimes in our city are committed by unhoused individuals. So obviously, but of those crimes, a number of them are how do we say low level type crimes where it's a you know a stop and grab type situation, stealing of a bike um, in our downtown, in our parking structure, um, you know, breaking into cars and these kind of nature. And so, what we thought about with downtown is how we could, one, supplement the support for the police, but in addition to it, provide services for those type of situations that weren't serious crimes, but were negatively affecting our downtown and the economics of our downtown. And that's those kind of discussions I feel that need to be on council, and they have been on council. And I think I can provide some insight with respect to that.
So what's that going to change? Because again, like, and I
Okay.
don't see like I'm picking on you, but
No,
like
no, I don't know. What's that
all the
going to
candidates,
change?
yeah. So like I guess I'm looking for what's it going to. So we're going to have a discussion, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We not that we everyone because voters have different knowledge levels,
Right,
but
right,
we know that 2/3 of the folks that Santa Monica police arrest are homeless, right? That they're arrestees. 2/3 of the arrestees are homeless. We
right,
know
right.
that fire department, the vast bulk of their calls is EMS, emergency medical services,
That's
ambulance
true.
transports for homeless people. So you've got this knowledge and insight from working on it at downtown. What is going to change? Are you going to change? Are you going to change deployments? Are you going to ask the chief to change deployments? Are you going to pick like what's going to change from this dais? Like what are you going to and sit in the seat? What are you going to point at and say this policy needs to change and here's how it's
Well, one
going
of
to
the
change?
things is that I'm going to want to take an approach that is an approach where we not only change policy, but we also change the community's direction with their mindset as to how we deal with homelessness. And what I mean by that is discussions on on council has not been sufficient with respect to how we're going to provide housing for these unhoused individuals and how we're going to provide the services that are needed. And we had a lot of pushback. We had a lot of pushback from our downtown um, businesses with respect to uh, closing of the parking structure number 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a perfect example where my advocacy on the downtown Santa Monica board really affected that change. And we had, I mean, we had a number of businesses and a number of property owners that were totally against us taking out the parking
So
structure.
for folks who don't
But
know, we'll just give them. So
okay,
parking structure
right,
number three is one of the big multi-story
right,
parking structures. Used to be on Fourth Street, kind of opposite the bank, and the city has a project to replace it with affordable housing. So that project, that parking structure, has currently been demoed. Now it's just a piece of flat ground,
right.
and at some point in the future, some kind of housing project will be built that includes housing for formerly homeless individuals.
With services provided.
Yeah, just so
Okay,
people understand what you're talking about.
okay. So I'm glad you and that was an incredibly um, that was incredibly difficult for council to pass. I think if we didn't have the council at the present time, at the time that this initiative was brought before them, it may not have passed.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a big proponent of it. I really do believe that providing that type of housing in our downtown will alleviate some of the issues we have with our unhoused population down there, which will hopefully reduce some of the petty crimes that we're seeing in our downtown also.
How much of an impact is that going to make? How many? So I can't remember off the top of my head how many units are for the specifically formerly homeless.
It's
Do you
going
remember?
to, yeah, no, I don't remember, but it's going to be a small impact.
It's like 12 units, I
Okay.
think. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd have to check the numbers, so I may be wrong. People can
I
bash me on
think
the
it might be a
internet.
little bit more,
I think there
but
may be 40 in the
it's
project,
40.
and I think
Right.
it might. I thought it was 12 that were formerly homeless, and so that project is controversial. And when you say that the business owners were opposed to it, I think they still are. Like, I have not met a single DTSM business owner who thought that was a good idea. Now, right or wrong, I'm just saying I think businesses are adamantly opposed to it because in their minds, two things: like, a, they think putting low income housing and or housing for formerly homeless attached to downtown will do nothing to boost the fortunes of business owners. They don't
Mhm.
believe it's going to increase shoppers in any measurable capacity. They generally think that the loss of parking is going to make it people who would have shopped there go somewhere else. Like, well, see. But then there's the notion that also it's just not going to make a difference to the actual problem of homelessness on the promenade.
Well, this is. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, I'm a big proponent of what we talk about the three P's. Providing providing homes is one. Providing providing affordable homes is one. Providing protection for tenants is another one that I'm very much supportive of. And then the third item is producing more affordable housing. But one of the things there's a fourth P that I always talk about, and this is having the political will to be able to move those things in that direction. I don't believe, right, presently at this time, the council has the political will to really understand that if we don't provide affordable housing, if we don't provide these particular services, that we will have an even more difficult situation with our unhoused population. And we have shown over these last 4 years where we've kind of taken a step back with respect to providing the type of housing and services needed for this particular population for us to be successful. And I don't think we're moving in the right direction with it. That's why I think someone like myself being on council would really kind of move that kind of discussion.
Sure. And so it
You
doesn't
need to,
really,
yeah,
I get that. It doesn't necessarily address what I think, particularly the DTSM project is, which is
right,
that like DTSM is our business and economic engine of the
right,
city. And so if you make it, so I guess a couple of points, which will lead into my next question here,
sure,
which is that when you look at the kind of population that's causing a problem with homelessness downtown, those aren't individuals that are going to transition into housing. Because to transition into I don't believe that project is locked into I don't I shouldn't say that. The kind of individual who is prepared to go into housing and be successful at it isn't the kind of person that's like yelling in the doorway. It isn't the kind of person who is being violent in the streets. It isn't the kind of person who's creating the problems downtown. And that leads into this notion of we can build housing, absolutely, and you can put folks who are ready to take housing into it. But if you continue to build housing, whether it's ad nauseum or not, and you continue to increase the services, you continue to provide more options, more services for the needs of the homeless, does that not just draw more homeless people here?
No, I
You don't
don't.
think it does?
I don't believe it does, I'm a firm. No, I don't. I mean, I believe that one. You brought one bringing attention. It's not just a Santa Monica problem. I agree with you
Hmm.
that we have to be strong advocates to our 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 our, our county and our state government to be able to push for uh, housing for mentally ill individuals. That's not the housing we were talking about downtown,
No.
but we need that also.
Hmm.
Okay, there's a number of types of service that we need for housing. You are right. When someone is on the street screaming his head off, or someone sitting on the street or defecating on the street, those type of individuals, need a type of service that right at this point in time we don't really provide in Santa Monica, and our county and state government should provide for. I'll give you a perfect example. In my day job, I'm a CPA, and I'm a forensic accountant, so I deal with litigation. I do a lot of trust and estate and conservatorship type work, and I've always argued that one of the things that we're missing with our unhoused population, those that are severely, severely mentally ill, or those that are severely, severely uh, drug related. We need to set up a structure, like a structure that I see every day with my conservatorship work, where we hire professionals, an accountant, a
Hmm.
medical professional, an attorney, and we have to report. We have to report uh, to the government or to a court system that's structured as to whether these individuals are getting what they need and also are able to take care of themselves. And we haven't done that. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is really be able to advocate for at our state and our on our county level. And if we don't do that, you're right. Individually, what I'm seeing, I'm seeing it in Santa Monica. I'm seeing it when it happened in Venice. I'm seeing it in Marina. That all we're doing is pushing homeless around. We're seeing which city or which unincorporated area can push these individuals out the furthest. Okay, and I don't agree that if we provide those services, that more will come. But I do think if we are providing those services, that we should get compensated by the state and by county to be able to show that we're doing provide. And that's something that hasn't
Sure.
happened either.
And second part, totally, absolutely agree. Get that. But
Yeah.
going back to the first part, you don't think more people will come here. I mean,
Nah,
we know unequivocally that the vast majority of folks aren't from Santa Monica who are homeless on our streets. We absolutely know
we
that.
know that.
And so we also, I know anecdotally, because I spent 10 years sitting across the street from the city's largest provider of services, I know unequivocally, there's no one could tell me that I won't, anything that won't stop me from believing this, that facility drew people to it. I watched it. I watched people draw to that facility at certain times of the day. And I'm not saying that, and again, I'll say this to all the candidates, like
Right,
the
right,
train itself isn't a problem. The train just happens to be the most convenient transportation system today. If it wasn't a train, it would be a bus. If it wasn't
right,
a
right,
bus, it'd
right,
be a
right, right.
taxi. People would walk. But people came to my block for the services.
I,
And not just that, but we know those people who would show up on the block, they'd be there for 2, 3 weeks, and then you'd never see them again. There's no question that services center drew people to it. And so this leads into the question, so this notion of we know folks aren't from Santa Monica largely who are homeless, which means that people are in fact traveling here from other places. The question is, why are they then traveling here? People who say it's weather or whatever, you can point to El Segundo and Manhattan Beach and other Malibu places that have our weather that don't have our influx. So if it's not the services that draw people in, I would argue the weather's
well,
equalness of the places.
but
Like, what's drawing them here then?
but that brings me to my next point that if we're doing a better job of providing those services,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we are than some other
Yeah,
cities,
I don't
I
question
say
that at all. Yeah.
that we should also benefit financially from our state and federal government, and that's where the policies where I think I can be strongly advocating
Mm-hmm.
for. I mean, like I said, I was a state trustee. This is all obviously in the educational system, but one of the things I constantly did is advocated for the housing at the community college level. I mean, from day one that I got in, I started talking about it, started meeting with legislators. I mean, it took me at least 5 years to even talk about it, and over the last 4 years, I mean, our budget now is difficult, but they did find some money to be able to start some pilot programs. What I'm saying is that if we're doing a better job than other cities, then we need to benefit financially from other cities, from our state and local
Hmm.
government. And that part of it, I think, is something that we as city council members can really push hard for. I don't, and I can't tell you if we're doing that right now. I don't see that as much. But on the other hand, and we bring it to the ones that are severely, we realize already, and I know this from being on downtown Santa Monica board, that the closest bed for someone that's severely mentally ill or severely has drug problem is Torrance.
Yeah. So again,
I mean,
just setting the stage for folks who don't
right,
realize that there's something we sometimes refer to it as a sober psych
right.
facility,
So
right?
right,
So folks get taken down to the specialized facility that's in Torrance,
right,
and they get held for a period of time to determine if they're psychotic or mentally ill, or if they're experiencing some sort of drug induced
exactly.
problem, and they're sort of transitioned into two buckets. But then essentially they're released, right? They're not forced into treatment
Well,
necessarily.
that's where what I just gave you a scenario should be the next step.
Yeah.
Okay, I've said that. On the other hand, the fact that it's all the way to Torrance, and we also know that the ambulance services that we contract out, okay, that we contract out, are also something that we don't have a whole lot of control from a city standpoint. So what that does, Brad, is that when someone like that is in that kind of situation, and I've seen it several times before. I can't tell you how many times either police or fire, we're waiting, okay, for a number of hours to move someone, and they don't have a place to take them. And that, for me, is one, a dereliction of duty, but also from a city standpoint, it's a waste of resources when we really need to have those resources providing more, particularly our police,
Hmm.
providing more safety. So those are things that council should be constantly talking about. And just recently, council um, had a discussion about whether or not we're going to change the policy with respect to allowing people to have blankets or
Yep.
sleeping
Sleeping bags.
bags. Okay, I was totally upset about it, and the reason I was upset about it is because it was it, I found it to be more of I found it more. I didn't see where it was going to provide any kind of real initiative to support what our issue is with our in-house people, and I really thought it was. A waste of time for council to be even talking about something like this because it wasn't going to benefit what we're talking about right now as providing these kind of services that really need it. So I was really disappointed to hear that kind of thing.
The police chief was in favor of that
I know
change,
he
right?
was.
Because
I
he
know he was.
expressly said that if you the more things you give, the more things you put on this list. The list is not outright banned. It's a list of things that can be used to define an encampment. It's like somewhat weird gray, but that's what it means. And so what he said is the more opportunities his officers have to, my words, not his, put pressure on someone to talk to a police officer, the more opportunities his officers then have to encourage that person to get into services or to make an inroad or to somehow remove their isolation from them and force them into an interaction with someone who might be able to connect them to services. Like that was his logic behind this is
Right.
that it gives his officers more tools. And so like
I totally heard what the police chief
but you just
has.
agree you just disagree with you
I,
disagree with his logic or just like with the ethics of it.
I disagree with the ethics of it completely.
Got it.
Okay, and I believe that we can provide the needed interaction with police and other um, security, other services without having to, um, find somebody for having a blanket or a sleeping bag if that was the way the process of doing it. You know, and Brad, one of the things that we don't talk about an awful lot is, and with our in-house population, is that policies that have been enacted way before this particular council for years has really contributed to our unhoused population to a lot of extent also. Um, Housing is a big issue. Obviously, affordability in Santa Monica is becoming a thing of the past. Okay, we realize. I mean, I think your newspaper just did something just recently where 69, almost 70% of someone's income goes towards just providing household needs. I mean, that's a huge amount of
Mm-hmm.
money on a monthly basis. But I do also believe that we don't talk about um, the systemic racism in certain policies that cities, and our city is one of them,
Mm-hmm.
that has enacted over the years that also have contributed to what we're seeing right now. And what I mean by that is, Santa Monica's African American black population is 4%. The homeless
Four
population,
percent rounding up, right?
right, 4%, right, right. So of the 90,000 people, we're talking about 3,600 people,
Mm-hmm.
all right. But the homeless population for Black folks are 33%,
Mm-hmm.
Brad. That's crazy. And I understand that these things are the reason for these things are exactly historical policies that have happened before. And for me, um, as a 20-year resident of working, as I told you, as a public servant in our community, I'm always very sensitive as to how it's affecting um, my neighborhood, Black folks, when we set policies. And I wasn't in Santa Monica when the freeway came through, which took away a lot of Black homes. I was not here when the city took eminent domain over a property on Ocean
Mm-hmm.
Boulevard for a hotel. But these kind of policies that our city government has perpetuated over the years has a direct effect of who our homeless folks are. And if we don't recognize that, if we don't have someone sitting at the table talking about those things also, then we will set policies that will will affect those that need it the most even more. And I see it. I mean, I know how difficult it is. I live in the Pico neighborhood. Okay, I'm not supportive of of, of district voting,
Mm-hmm.
even though the discussion about district voting is that it's been so detrimental to minority groups. Um,
Explicitly Latinos, right? Like
Specifically Latinos, which
that's
which I think is kind of a joke also because we have three Latinos on our on our city council. We have one on two on our school board. We have one on our college board. Um, and if we didn't have at-large voting, there's no way that I, being a Pico resident, would consider running because it would be difficult for me to be successful in just that small area. Um, to win an election. But being a city council member of an at large in Santa Monica gives me an opportunity to be successful in my race.
so. Going back to I think you may be the only candidate who has brought up racist historic policies as a talking point,
Yeah.
right? So say conversations go where they go.
Yeah. No.
So
Yeah.
I'm interested, and I get it. The Belmar neighborhood again. Nutshell history for folks who don't know:
Right.
the freeway came in and destroyed a thriving, vibrant black neighborhood, just wiped it out. We have one little vestigial shotgun house left as an
Right.
example of what
Right.
was there.
Right.
You mentioned the eminent domain. A gentleman named Silas White had a
Right.
project. Like council's talked about this a little bit. Do you? So those are sort of historic things that I don't say they're over or fixed, but like there aren't current. They're not currently proposing a freeway expansion. So, in terms of where you're at today, do you see something in the current Santa Monica policies, procedures, rules, or laws that is left over with that vestigial racism that you think is still impacting the community today? And if so, how would you change it? And if you can't, I'll give you a
Well,
more specific example if you don't have something. But right.
well, I, to think of something like that. One, you know, Matt, every time that I have an I like to ride my bike a lot early in the morning. I drop my son off at school.
Mm-hmm.
I ride around town just to kind of see, particularly when I was on the downtown Santa Monica board, what on how population, what's it all about? And one of the hot areas is 7th and Wilshire over by the 7th 11. That
Yep.
was a really hot
Yep.
area. Here we are
It's,
across the
it
street.
is an open air homeless
Okay,
encampment, right?
we
Right there
have
and in Reed Park.
right there, right there, and but we have one of the most expensive hotels
Mm-hmm.
across the street.
Yep.
I mean, it's incredible that the proper hotels there, and across the street we have a homeless encampment, and Reed Park was one of the issues. When you ride past there, the amount of black males that you see sitting over there
Hmm.
is heart wrenching. On the other hand, I say to people, and if I was a single white woman, I guess I would be very fearful of walking down that street. And part of it is that you do have the encampment, but I also believe part of it is that it is predominantly black males down there. Okay, and it's just the how society has taken a look upon us. I've always kind of prided myself on being ethical in everything I do, being forthright, but being honest about um, how racism has affected the black community. And that doesn't mean that, and I live in Santa Monica because I believe that we're one of the most progressive communities. I've sat down with many people of other nationalities that really care about changing racial issues.
Hmm.
So that's why I live here. So I don't want to sound as if that all white people are racist or all non-blacks are racist. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you we have policies in place that have affected black people in Santa Monica to a point where when we start talking about safety, when you start talking about uh, improving our police department so that we can reduce crime, um, just naturally the reflection is those individuals that are committing it. And it happens to be more black people that in Santa Monica that are homeless based
Hmm.
on the percentage. So that's where myself as a city council member, when we start to articulate and start talking about those things, I'm going to always have in the back of my mind that sensitivity as to the fact that this person is homeless and the fact that this person is black um, will will not get the same kind of look as somebody that isn't. And
Sure.
so that for me is something as a platform that I'm able to talk about. Why? Because I've been in this community for 20 years. Why? Because I've sat at things and people have seen me interact and set policies and make votes on things. So I have a track record. And but I don't take anything lightly. I mean,
Sure.
I realize that we call ourselves progressive, but there's policies that really have affected people of color that we have to change.
So let me give you a specific here.
Okay.
So uh, this in the context of this conversation,
Yeah.
the subject of redlining often comes up. Redlining
Right.
meaning the practice of drawing zoning districts in
Right.
such a
Exactly.
way to
Exactly.
keep people of color out of certain
Right.
neighborhoods. That manifests and has evolved into some of the discussions around single family home
That's
neighborhoods.
right.
And there are some folks who advocate or make the argument that single family zoning, the zoning of neighborhoods that precludes multi-unit housing, is racist and is racist in origin.
Hmm.
And again, we've had a little bit of those discussions in Santa Monica. It hasn't been a huge talking point here, but come up a little bit.
Hmm.
You know, I guess how do you feel about that argument? Do you see that? Do you look at that? And as a policy change, do you think this leads back to housing and policy, right? Do you think we should be incentivizing, encouraging, or requiring more multi-unit housing in single-family neighborhoods?
I do. To answer both your questions, I do believe that we should be promoting more multi-type housing in single family neighborhoods. I don't want to change the nature of the neighborhood completely, but I do want people to realize that there's a reason why some of our single family neighborhoods are single family because of what you talked about with respect to redlining, and that individuals were not allowed to actually um, buy homes there. I've talked about a little bit at one of our forums that I grew up in New Jersey, and I remember when my dad and mom wanted to buy a house in a predominantly white neighborhood in the late '60s and early '70s, and we all went there in the evening to see it. We were excited about it, and 2 weeks later, my dad said that the neighborhood purchased a home. And I was in high school at the time. I didn't want to leave my high school anyway, so it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that big of a deal. But as I got older, and and we talk about generational wealth, you realize real quickly that the home that transferred to my brother, sister, and I when my parents passed away, if we had had the home in the neighborhood that he wanted to purchase, the generational wealth to us would have been greatly different.
Mm-hmm.
Been greatly different. Now, my dad, burned 3 mortgages. He's excited about doing that. Okay, but you know, being a CPA, working in this area, you realize real quickly that individuals who purchased their home in late 70s or early 70s and late 60s north of Montana, they're not wealthy. Okay, they were at the time they were able to buy a home at a reasonable price, but the amount of wealth they have in their home now compared to what my parents had at the time, it's greatly different. And it was
Mm-hmm.
only because of racial policies that happened. That has not changed that much. So when you ask me the question about single family individuals not seeing multiple units in their in their neighborhoods, the first reaction to me is, well, I mean, partly the reason why you hadn't seen them in the past is because you had laws that prohibited people of color to be able to buy homes in that area. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of discussion always has to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it happens enough at council.
So real quick, like I say, we were getting into our time in a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit,
no, but
and
okay,
we've talked about some good stuff, right?
yeah, yeah,
Housing,
I got,
homelessness, crime. Got through some topics.
yeah,
But is there a topic that you wanted to bring up or talk about?
yeah, I do,
Okay,
and one
go
of the
for it.
things that I think is really important, people are talking about, you know, certain candidates are more proponent to safety, some aren't. The reality of it, the 10 candidates the 9 candidates I've sit with running for city council, I think we all care very deeply about safety. I mean, I really do. However, one of the things that I've talked about an awful lot is ethics, and I think as a city council member, providing providing ethical leadership and providing professional leadership is really important. And there's a couple of things, and I put in your newspaper that I was really disappointed when we heard that items out of closed session were coming out to the public. That shows me, as a citizen, a lack of professionalism with our current council, not to want to investigate it, not to want to spend the time to really see if that's the case and make some corrective action. I don't care what you say. I've been on councils, school boards, and college boards for 9 years. I take my job as a board member and the responsibility and the etiquette of a board member very seriously. I don't see this present council where that is. I get concerned, and
Mm-hmm.
that for me is unsafe. And I think that those individuals, and then secondly, and this is a huge one, we presently have a major lawsuit with a resident, in a resident from the Pico neighborhood, whose husband is a city council member who sits on closed door sessions discussing this particular lawsuit. You know, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what any judge says. The lack of independence, the appearance or lack of independence based on that situation doesn't make me feel safe.
Sure.
Okay, and so for me, part of safety, there's two things about safety: being safe and the feeling of being safe. And if we can't have city council members that project that feeling of doing the right things individually or as a council, then we lose credibility as a community, and we need to change that.
So again, a nutshell explanation,
No,
real quick for folks. You're referencing the California Voting Rights Act case there.
right,
One of the plaintiffs is Maria Loya, who's married to Oscar De La Torre.
right,
It's brought by her and Pico Neighborhood Association, which Oscar used to be a president of. And there was a period of time where council was excluding him from closed session discussions with their attorney over the case. This was after he joined council because he wasn't on council when it started, right?
right.
And then he filed a lawsuit, and a judge ruled in his favor, forcing the city or forcing the council to allow him to participate in those
Right.
closed session discussions.
Exactly.
Again, not sure if I got to give you the record on that. So, like, I totally hear what you're saying on that. Like I said, I get the other state mates have mentioned it. I saw the press release, read a story about it. When it comes to this particular subject, one of the things that I guess strikes me about it is if I were to go out and ask 100 people on the street right now on Main Street, A, if they even know about this, and B, if I explain it to them and ask them to put it in a rank out of 10 things they care about in the election, I don't think most people know about it. and I don't think most people would rank it very highly in their personal reflections on the current election. I think most people are very focused on things that we just earlier, like housing, crime, homelessness, rent, like some of those other kinds of things. I even think the social justice and racial justice motivations are probably vastly more interesting to folks than this category. And I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying the leaks are anything less than that. The leaks happened, absolutely violations of policy, absolutely unethical. Council the appearance of choosing not to investigate the leaks is how you want to describe it, like laughable. Like, would you not investigate it? But when it comes to an actual brass tacks winning an election, like making a pitch to voters, I guess I'm curious how you think that plays with voters. Like, do you think this is something? Do you think I'm wrong and most people have a much stronger opinion of it, or is it just something that you think that you are so like morally outraged by, you feel the need to bring forward and educate people on? Like, I
I,
guess I sorry to cut you. Yeah, go
no,
ahead.
Matt, no, I think that your your observation about people, I think in general, people have a insensitivity and a lack of um, how do I say it? Not an insensitivity, but have real concerns about our our government overall. That it lacks a lot of professionalism. It lacks a lot of do I trust it? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of do I trust it? And these kind of things, even though it may not rise to one of the higher issues with respect to residents, are things um, like what's happening with Council Member De La Torres, are things that, as a city council member, if we carry ourselves in a certain manner, I think what happens is the community becomes much more secure in knowing that we're making decisions that will benefit the community. They may not know about individual things, and that's why I said the lack of independence as a city council member. You want people to have be on city council that are willing to continue to look at themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean to continue to say, am I doing a good job as a city council? Am I doing the right things as a city council member? So it didn't need um, um, Councilman De La Torres didn't need to have a judge tell him that there was a lack of independence by him sitting in a lawsuit that was by his wife in closed session. He should have, in his own morals, said to himself, you know what? That's a lack of independence. And if I'm a city council member and I'm also a husband, I need to understand that I need to separate those kind of issues when issues come to play. I mean, I'm going to be on city council, and my wife is head of is a member of the Travel and Tourism Board.
Mm-hmm.
When I become a city council member, she's going to have to step off. Okay, I mean, because councils felt that it was a lack of independence when someone's wife or husband is on a commission and we're a city council member. So, I mean, if we felt that strongly about having someone in your household on a commission or a committee when you're on city council, why don't we, as city council members, also feel just as strongly about not taking part in discussions with respect to a major lawsuit, which a law? And I've heard Councilman De La Torre talk about settling it. Okay, settling the lawsuit that he definitely has a conflict in. So
Sure. And we don't go too much down because
right,
you already
right,
mentioned you're opposed to districts,
right,
and
right,
so
right,
wasn't going to open that whole can of worms
right,
because
right,
you stated that earlier.
right, right.
We can move on from there.
Okay,
So again, we're kind of approaching time a little bit.
okay,
So
man.
do you want to take a couple minutes
Yeah,
and give a closing statement? And
man, I really appreciate this. I mean, I'm at a stage in my life and I'm at a stage in my career where, I, I'm jumping into this race. I'm hoping to be on council so I can really um, make directions. One of the things that I've always been told is that you need 4 votes for anything to move. And our council has been split quite often over the last 4 years.
yeah, a lot of four
A
three votes.
lot of 4-3 votes. And I don't care what anybody says, but the lack of consistency. I'm not saying we have to always agree on everything, but it really takes away from moving things forward as to benefit the community. And I think, and not so much the 4-3 votes, but the 4-3 votes have been in the same camp. It would be different if we had council members that were to willing to cross the line with their other council members and find common ground. And I don't think that's been done enough. And I think that's something that I'm capable of doing. Um, I think I've sat on a number of boards here, even with the downtown Santa Monica board when I wasn't in favor of certain issues. I was able to find common ground with respect to my board members. And I think that's the kind of council member that you need, someone that would be willing to cross the line, will be willing to really listen to people that maybe you don't agree with at a point in time. And I've been doing it. I've been doing it for a long time. So I'm hoping that I can continue to do it when I'm on city council.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So I thank you, man.
Appreciate
I
you coming in.
appreciate it.